What do a goldfish driving a robot on land, a rat cruising around in a lab, and a California girl trekking around in the snow have in common? We're all doing things that don't come naturally to us. And still, we figured out how to succeed in unfamiliar situations and environments. How? It has to do with what's up here and the fact that we're not hard-headed. Quite the opposite, actually. Mental flexibility is critical to all brains and really to our survival. But before we get into the wonderful world of brains, neuroplasticity and learning, let's head indoors because it's freezing out here. So now that we're settled in, let's start with the goldfish. What you're seeing here is its robo-ride down the side of a street. But before the fish was let loose, it had to learn to drive indoors as part of a recent experiment to test whether fish actually had the brain power to learn to drive a vehicle. And that answer was a resounding yes. So a goldfish can drive. Why does that even matter?
Adaptation to new environment and new ways of advancing in space, this is very important for all animals, not just for fish, but also for us.
That's Ronan Segev, the neuroscientist who trained the fish to drive. The brain's plasticity, or flexibility to adapt, is critical for our survival. It's what allows us to come up with creative solutions to hard problems, like finding friends or food, or avoiding threats like predators and the extreme cold. By studying animals, scientists can get insights into how different brains react to new challenges and what their limits might be. That's important in two ways: for understanding the evolution of brains generally, and for understanding what goes wrong when brains malfunction. The goldfish in Ronan's experiment had to learn to steer a robotic vehicle towards a pink target in a terrestrial environment. Ronan compared the experience of his fish to humans in outer space, where humans have to learn to move in zero gravity, sometimes inside cumbersome spacesuits. His goldfish had to figure out that their position in the tank controlled the way the vehicle moved. It's not unlike
when we learn to ride a bike or drive a car, we know that this is actually a very complex motor task.
And the fish didn't just manage, they adapted and thrived. They got so good that about a dozen driving sessions in, they were getting
full lunch from these experiments.
Each time the fish hit their pink target, they got a bit of fish food. Remember that word because we're going to come back to it later. Even when the researchers moved the target or added decoys, the fish still made their way to the food.
It's not an accidental just bumping into the target due to some random motion.
Over time, their path to lunch became more direct. They really knew where they were going. This fish driving experiment and another test I'm about to tell you in just a sec are important for two reasons. First, animals are smart, maybe smarter than we give them credit for.
In some ways, they're kind of super achievers.
That's Kelly Lambert, a neuroscientist who studies stress, anxiety, and resilience. But in her experiments, rats, rather than fish, are the stars. The fact that animal brains are capable of some pretty complex behaviors gives researchers like Kelly more confidence that we can learn something about ourselves by studying other animals. That's important because researchers often use animal brains as proxies for ours. So knowing how far they can be challenged is important for improving the basic research that guides clinical development.
It's still not perfect because rats are not little humans and we're not big rats. But it's a starting point.
I promised you a second insight, so here it is. Motivation and reward is important for learning and adapting. For Ronan's goldfish, it was fish food. And in Kelly's lab,
our rats love Fruit Loop. I don't know if that's a good endorsement for Fruit Loop cereal, but they'll work for that.
Incidentally, Fruit Loops maker Kellogg's did not respond to a request for comment. Over the course of months, her team coaxed the rats to take up driving by rewarding them with sugary cereal. In the process, her team noticed an interesting difference between the two sets of rats they were working with. One group lived in standard cages. The other rats had bigger cages with toys and other rats to play with. Pura vida rata edition. The animals in the enriched environment learned faster, meaning it took them fewer sessions to go from the start line to the finish line, where they were rewarded with more Fruit Loops. We see something similar in humans. We know that having access to education, resources, a nice living environment when we're kids, that all sets us up for success later in life. As for the rats, the researchers also noticed another interesting difference. Once the rats were familiarized with their ride, Kelly noticed that the privileged rats drove further, even without the Fruit Loop stimulus.
something about their brains that were different that allowed.
Kelly doesn't know what the difference was anatomically, but she wants to take a look at how the connections between brain cells change as rats learn to drive.
Neurons are so wonderful, like they're trees with roots and connections. So those existing neurons can be plugged into more circuits.
The strengthening of neural connections and the sprouting of new ones is fundamental for brain plasticity. Even without knowing these details, it's clear that something about the rats' prior experience shaped their perception of reward and made them either less or more prone to explore. Neuroscientists know that novelty can be rewarding too, so maybe the rats in the fancy cages were more attuned to that, and their brains were already primed to experiment and adapt. So what does this mean for us? When we look closer at the fish and the rats driving, they're really showing us neuroscience in action. They're evidence that our brains are incredibly flexible and that our experience has the power to shape us and how we function in the world. They also show us that rewards motivate us to try new things and that experimenting can help prepare us for the unexpected, helping to increase our chances for survival. Those are some pretty profound lessons from viral videos that at first glance look like party tricks. As you can probably tell, I love brains. So if you have neuroscience related questions, please leave them in the comments. And while you're at it, hit subscribe. If you're interested in human drivers, check out our mobility channel. Thanks for watching y gracias. The strengthening, oh my God, I broke it.